When most people think of the term conspiracy theory, aliens, UFOs and Area 51 is the first thing that pops into people's minds. Despite this topic being a cliche, when it comes to conspiracy theories, believe it or not, it isn't a subject which I really look into, apart from watching the Odd Discovery Channel documentary sprawled across my sofa hungover, eating my body weight in paracetamol and cheese-based potato snacks. So for full disclosure, I'm genuinely starting off this journey with no exact extraterrestrial expectation. I want to explain that I've gone into this with the mindset that every possible explanation has to be ruled out before drawing any conclusion that aliens are with us. To be honest, I've seen many intelligent arguments for both sides of this debate, and to be fair, some pretty stupid ones as well. This time 2 weeks ago, I was pretty much on the fence, so let's see whose garden I've fallen into. Let's begin. So we can't even begin to talk about Area 51 until we discuss the cold and terrifying facts behind the base, as well as discussing what Black Project operations are, also known as Black Ops. Everything I'm about to tell you in this next section is true and legally documented. Black Project operations are so sensitive that in 1945 the US Congress were just as surprised as the rest of the world when learning that America had dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Not one member of Congress was remotely aware that America were even testing, let alone that they had successfully created such a powerful weapon. Even President Harry Truman was shocked to learn about the Manhattan Project when he took office earlier that year, and he was the Vice President and he was the chair of the Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program, which means that he was essentially in control of the war budget during the war. The bomb cost $27 billion. If you had that sort of money in your account today, you would be able to buy Barbados with enough change to buy Samoa, Tonga, Sierra Leone and Grenada. However, the man in charge of investigating war expenditure, the Vice President, who was second in command of America, was not allowed to know. The level of secrecy with the Manhattan Project, which employed over 200,000 people and drew more power off the electrical grid than New York given any night, still was kept in absolute secrecy. I mean, that's incredible. The Manhattan Project was the first Black Project operations, and Black Ops continue to this day. So this was the start of an unprecedented whole new system where pockets of secrets and operations were conducted at a level that not even the President of the United States was allowed to know, or at least it was at classified status, which means he or she will be informed if it's deemed necessary. So in 1994, when President Bill Clinton created the Executive Order of the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to look into secrets kept by the Atomic Energy Commission, he was denied access to many records, including reports from Area 51. So after the Second World War, America needed to foster and control the peacetime development of atomic science and technology. So Congress, with President Harry Truman, established the Atomic Energy Commission, transferring full control of atomic energy from military to civilian hands. This shift gave members of the Atomic Energy Commission complete control of plants, laboratories, equipment, and personnel established during the war to produce the atom bomb. So for the first time in American history, a federal agency was created and operated by unelected civilians that can conduct anything in secret which is classified based on factors other than a presidential executive order. So with all that in mind, I don't know about you, but when my imagination runs with what they could have got up to and what they can and can't get away with to this day, it's quite terrifying. And we haven't even started talking about aliens yet. So after the war, the Atomic Energy Commission had full control of the Nevada Test and Training Range, the largest government-controlled land parcel in the United States, which covers over 4,670 square miles. So I have been sad enough to work out this landmass, if placed in the UK, and it's round about here. All of this is huge. And with their newly acquired land, they sat back and thought, sod it, let's blow some shit up. So they did. During this period, it's estimated that they tested 926 nuclear tests, of which 826 were tested underground. Environmentally, this makes my diesel car seem like a flatulent koala. And again, during this period, there was no government or moral supervision. During some of these black ops, animals and even humans were tested on. There's not much known, however one test involved ordering soldiers into a trench as close to an atom bomb detonating as possible to see if they would panic. On the very border of this test site, a salt lake bed called Groom Lake was used as a runway, as the terrain was perfect for aircraft, and this would become the location and birthplace of Area 51. So in the mid-50s, the CIA wanted a way to spy on the Russians during the Cold War, so they decided to build a secret base for the sole purpose of constructing, testing and developing many spy planes using cutting-edge science. Groom Lake, also known as Watertown, Dreamland, Paradise Ranch and Homey Airport, which sound more like Simpsons episodes, was the perfect location to undertake this black project. The origin of the name Area 51 is unclear, although it is believed to come from the Atomic Energy Company numbering grid, although Area 51 is not part of that system. It is adjacent to Area 15, and another explanation is that 51 was to be used because it was unlikely that the Atomic Energy Commission would actually use that number. The US government denied its existence until the 25th of June 2013, when the CIA publicly acknowledged the base for the first time, following a Freedom of Information Act request filed 7 years previously, and they disclassified documents detailing the history and purpose of Area 51. So now we've touched down on Area 51, let's spend 5 minutes to discuss the whole point in this episode and also the reason you tuned in, UFOs. So earlier this month, I asked members of the Average Joe Conspiracy Show Facebook group whether they believe aliens have ever visited Earth. I was really surprised to see that 68% of the group strongly believe or feel it's likely aliens have visited this little rock at some point. So when researching UFO sightings, I found an interactive website called Argus.com where it clearly shows you where every reported UFO sighting has been in the US between 1910 and 1914. According to the website, they have data on over 80,000 reported sightings in the United States alone. That's roughly 770 per year on average, and is also the population of Salisbury. So looking a little bit closer to home, between 1997 and 2009, the UK government published every reported UFO sighting on the gov.uk website. However, the Ministry of Defence stopped investigating this information in 2009. And to be completely honest, I'm not really surprised. There's absolutely streams of information available to read, and some of the details are just lazy, to be honest. So what do we consider a UFO? I was really surprised to see that pretty much all English dictionaries like Oxford and Cambridge describe UFOs as basically being flying saucers and alien spaceships. Actually, Urban Dictionary pushed me for a definition. UFO is something that attention seekers, scam artists, the mentally unwell, Amish folk, as well as both legal and illegal recreational drug enthusiasts claim to see in the sky. Or it's an alien spacecraft, or the Russians, I don't know. If we did, then the term UFO would be redundant. Okay, submit. They need it in a sentence. Quick, grab the worst camera we own. I think I can see a UFO. Submit.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
So for the purposes of this video, let's remove the image we all get in our minds when referring to the acronym UFO. So space.com refers to a UFO as any flying object an observer cannot readily identify, which I feel is more accurate. So ignoring the scammers, the pranksters, the attention seekers, the crazy folk, the drug-induced, and the people that are just telling downright porkies, we need to list off what genuine people have seen in the skies other than aliens. Well, actually, there are surprisingly many things that have explained sightings when investigated over the years. There are obvious ones like planes, gliders, helicopters, drones, and balloons from the hot air, blimp, party, and weather variety, but also more stranger things have been found to explain sightings such as meteorites, unusual cloud formations, planets. Yes, planets. Incredibly, Venus gets mistaken for aliens all the time, according to livescience.com. Also, missile tests, the moon, large flocks of birds, and even particular types of lightning called sprite lightning have explained sightings. These are natural weather phenomena that flash high in the atmosphere triggered by thunderstorms. Lights can suddenly appear when lightning from thunderstorms excite the electric field from a storm, producing dancing flashes of bright light. Although I invested hours in research, and although I typed up a whole part for this episode to discuss the 3 UFO clips released in April 2020 that were declassified by the US government, after finding all the information I did, I feel it deserves its whole episode on its own, so I'm placing that in the conversation fridge for us to snack on a later date. However, I was genuinely concerned at how relaxed people were finding out that the American government had just basically confirmed the existence of aliens. If aliens are here, and we know about them, it cannot be good. Just based on the fact that they're here would mean that they would have minds immeasurably superior to ours. They would have to have technology so advanced that it would be like comparing Homo sapien technological achievements to a shit otter. And even if they do decide to make contact and declare that they come in peace, which would be completely nonsensical, as history has demonstrated thousands of times when advanced and primitive cultures have met, we would have to agree on many moral values, accepting unimaginable cultural differences, and fully respect each other, which even England and Wales struggle with, especially during the Six Nations. And that's not even mentioning diseases, viruses and nasty bacteria which would inevitably be exchanged. The best we could hope for is that they would see exterminating us the equivalent of shooting a puppy in the face, so placing us into some sort of intergalactic zoo, with us having no idea we're being watched, like kids observing fish at the Sea Life Centre. Another culprit which thousands of people mistake for aliens over the years, which is also the link to the main point of this video, is military experiments. But you have to imagine that during this period, average Joes seeing planes with such strange designs would think they, well, look pretty alien. So does that clear up everything? Well, no. Actually, we've only just started to scratch the surface of Area 51. After all the books, documentaries, podcasts and articles that I've read, it's clear that I'm going to be doing a fair few of these episodes moving forward. So I guess we need to establish when this Black Ops location became the most famous secret base in the world. So now, for those of you who have no real in-depth knowledge of Area 51, I want to spend a bit of time detailing a very interesting story. Somebody who single-handedly brought the world's curious eyes upon this secret location, and his name was Bob Lazar. So we pick up Bob Lazar's life during the summer of 1982. Lazar was a contractor working for the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Being described as somewhat a strange but intellectual individual, he was also a local celebrity in Los Alamos, as he would frequently drive around in his jet-propelled car, which he constructed in his own garage as a hobby. One day, Lazar drove across town to attend a lecture by Edward Teller, the famous theoretical physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb. Eager to attend the lecture, Lazar arrived very early, and to his amazement, Dr. Teller was casually reading a newspaper outside the building. Even more to his surprise, the famous Edward Teller was reading a local newspaper, which just so happened to print on the front page an article about Lazar and his jet car. Not wishing to waste the opportunity, Lazar approached Teller, opening with,
"That's me you're reading about there."
Impressed by the story, they both had a pleasant conversation and discussed common interests. So moving forward to 1988, looking for work, Lazar sent off a number of resumes to many laboratories in the area. He even contacted Edward Teller, who eventually arranged an interview between Lazar and a company called EG&G Special Projects. This was for a position in advanced propulsion. Lazar described the interview as strange, the interviewee being more interested in his jet car and personal life than his professional career. He accepted the offer of employment and found himself boarding a small private plane, also known as the Janet flights, to where he assumed was Groom Lake. He wasn't entirely sure because the curtains were drawn on the plane throughout the duration of the flight. He was then escorted by armed soldiers and placed on a bus, which again had windows with curtains fully drawn. They drove to a subsection of Area 51 called S4. He describes his first day as being relatively uneventful, explaining that he spent the day reading many briefs, 121 to be precise. These briefs described technology and detailed information about aircraft which Lazar described as knowing to be impossible. Accepting that it was some sort of test, he digested all the information without a second thought. When he was escorted to the main aircraft hangar, he then for the first time laid eyes on what he described as a flying saucer that was not from this world. He was later to find out that there were 9 craft in total, all kept in the aircraft hangar, all divided by retractable walls. He was only allowed to talk to 2 people, Dennis, his supervisor, and his partner, Barry. Even asking questions to other personnel risked being reprimanded. Lazar and Barry were to focus on the one craft and attempt to reverse engineer the alien technology. He describes the aircraft as a dark metallic disc-shaped saucer with interior and exterior parts that were smooth with no angles whatsoever. Also, all parts were self-functioning with no wires to connect the components. In the cockpit, there were 3 seats seemingly designed for nobody taller than 3 foot. Lazar, being 5'10", could only just stand up straight at the centre of the aircraft. When switching on the reactor, it would at no point increase in temperature, and when attempting to touch it, it appeared to have a force field, and it would repel any object that goes near it, including a human hand, the same way the 2 magnets will compulse. When speaking to Barry, he found out that the individual he was replacing was actually killed attempting to cut through the reactor with a laser. He couldn't move anywhere on the base without being escorted by armed military personnel who would often instruct him to keep his head down and to move through certain areas quickly. He details one time that when walking through a section of S4, he was approaching some offices. The soldier ordered Lazar to keep his eyes down and to keep moving as he passed a doorway. But when he walked past the room, curiosity got the better of him, and he couldn't fight the urge to look up for a second. Peering through a small window, he described 2 men looking down at a humanoid figure with long arms and a large head. The guard barked a second warning at Lazar, reminding him to keep his eyes on the floor. Lazar was convinced at the time that he'd seen an alien. However, in later interviews, he will admit that it was likely a fake alien mannequin that the 2 scientists were looking at, possibly trying to work out the size and scale of the intended spaceship pilot. On one Wednesday night, Dennis invited both Barry and Lazar to see a test flight on their particular spacecraft. They witnessed the saucer slowly and quietly raising off the ground, performing a few maneuvers around the base before landing back down in front of them. He was interested in speaking to the pilot, but he wasn't even allowed to see him, let alone speak to him. He witnessed paperwork breaking down the shape and size and even the internal organs of an alien being. Barry also explained that he had seen paperwork saying that the aircraft was found during an archaeological dig, so the aircraft could likely be an ancient relic. So after weeks and months, Lazar's excitement to explore this whole new technology turned into fear and uncertainty. Not only did he not like working in the unpleasant conditions, but also playing around with alien technology threatened its own risk. He described the situation as a Victorian coming across a nuclear reactor. Understanding that it's creating its own energy, they would attempt to take it apart, not having the slightest understanding of the dangers of deadly nuclear radiation. However, the weeks and months went past, and both Barry and Lazar continued to attempt to understand the impossible alien technology. To work in such a restricted environment, Lazar understandably had to agree to many terms and conditions, including that he couldn't discuss any information about Area 51 or S4 to anybody, including close friends and family, not even his wife. He also agreed for the CIA to bug his home phone, listening in to any and all personal conversations. As a result, roughly 6 months in, Bob's employer found out that his wife was having an affair with a flight instructor. Another condition of employment at the facility is that all employees must have a healthy and stable family life. Because they felt this situation could be possibly problematic, they decided to discourage Bob from coming into the facility without an explanation to assess the situation. Bob, having no idea the reason why, he began to become paranoid. He noticed that he was being followed during parts of his day, and he convinced himself that his employment was no longer wanted at S4, and was convinced that the CIA would not allow him to walk away with the knowledge he knew. He feared for his life. With this conclusion, he decided to let a small group of friends know of his experience of Area 51. As he knew that flight testing on the spacecraft was conducted on Wednesday nights, he convinced his friends to go with him out into the desert to Papoose Lake, where he knew they could observe S4 from afar. His friends for the first time witnessed the incredible and impossible machines being tested throughout the evening.
Up in the air like this and hovered, then dropped way down, then it just floated around.
No, what? Did you see that move it did?
No, I didn't.
It was like
I kept
doing boom. Well, look how bright it's getting.
Look at it now.
They returned 3 times after this. However, on the 3rd occasion, Bob and his group were caught by the Area 51 security team. They were arrested, questioned, and released. However, Bob was summoned to a debriefing the next day at Indian Springs Air Force. First, they wanted to confirm that it was Bob who got caught in the desert observing the flights, a truth that Bob did not try to hide. At this point, the officials got a little angry with him. After a colossal dressing down, they provided him transcripts of a phone conversation between his wife and her lover. Bob had no idea until this point that this was going on. After hours of interrogation at gunpoint, Bob was released that night, stressed and afraid. In Area 51's 40-year history, not one engineer, janitor, soldier, contractor, or any of the thousands of staff uttered any information regarding the secret base. At this point, being absolutely confident that his life was in danger, for the first time in history, he was going to break Area 51's secret to the world.
The inside ever talked publicly about the saucer stories.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
The live interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan.
Actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." He hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is
And
by
so,
any
for the
standard
last
fantasy.
30 years, Lazar has been presented on a pedestal, hailed as a shining example and evidence that aliens exist. However, he has been dehumanized and slated ruthlessly by debunkers. Within the last 2 weeks, I've watched countless documentaries, I've watched and listened to hours of interviews, I've read books and articles from both sides of the debate, and now I've got to sit back in my chair and try and draw some sort of conclusion. First of all, I wanted to look at his character, Bob Lazar as a person. Is he a credible individual? First of all, he claims to have a degree from a university called Pacifica. However, there is a debate whether he would have had time before the university closed in 1978. He also claims to have a master's degree in physics from MIT and another in electric technology from Caltech. Both institutions deny this. So into his personal life, he's been married 4 times, first to a lady called Carol, and then the second to a lady called Tracy Ann Merck, although he was still married to his first wife Carol, who incidentally took her own life 2 days after his second wedding. He then married Tracy again, but under a different name, Jackie Diane Evans. They will get divorced in 1990, assumably from the affair, and shortly after that, he would marry his current wife, Joy White. In 1990, Lazar was also arrested for essentially running a business of prostitutes with his wife, obviously wanting a changing career. He was ordered to do 150 hours of community service, to stay away from brothels, and to undergo psychiatric therapy. Also in 2006, Lazar and his wife were arrested and charged for shipping restricted chemicals across state lines. Then in 2007, his company, United Nuclear, were fined over $7,500 for essentially selling chemicals to make illegal fireworks. So taking that into consideration, I have no choice but to kind of think that his story might be slightly plausible, kind of. His love life has obviously been slightly strange. But I don't believe this is mutually exclusive. With regards to his education, he claims that the CIA have basically wiped his details from any university and employee files in an attempt to wreck his story. However, phone books, registers and files in later years detailing Lazar's name have been leaked from some of these establishments, and he arguably proves that he has detailed knowledge of employee and colleague names and details interior layouts and designs, although some people claim that these details are inaccurate. And basically all lie detector tests taken by Lazar have come back as inconclusive, as experts are still split down the middle as to whether he's lying or not when studying the results. And there are a few details to me that at least prove that he worked there, or at least knew somebody who worked at Area 51 and S4, as he gives little details that have proven to be true, like the existence of S4, which we had no information about until recently. So the Netflix documentary released in 2019 called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, ironically doesn't do the story justice. Jeremy Carbell, who made and starred in the documentary, comes across as fake and narcissistic, filming over half-hour in total, scenes where he's acting out phone calls and receiving text messages. Most importantly, I feel like he tries to deceive the audience on a few occasions regarding details of the FBI raiding Lazar's house during filming, and a scene regarding a hand scanner used at Area 51, which he claims to have obtained pictures of for the first time. However, the same machine is filmed in the 1978 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This doesn't necessarily mean that the story is complete nonsense, but it does show that watching a Carbell documentary, you need to do some serious fact-checking. There is one slight detail which sticks in my mind and doesn't really help this story. We're told by Lazar that the fuel source for UFOs is element 115, which again, we're informed, wasn't really known during this period. It wasn't even on the periodic table at this time. Nevertheless, it was mentioned for the first time in a magazine called Scientific America, published 2 weeks before Lazar's first interview. To me, that just seems too much of a coincidence. And apart from on a few occasions, he has been relatively consistent considering the 30 years he's been telling this story. When watching Lazar, he comes across as a man who is telling a good, detailed, honest story. Just watching hours of interviews, he shows no sign of anger or frustration that liars tend to show when being confronted. So, the final question, is Lazar telling the truth? Honestly, I don't know. I guess my conclusion is that if he is lying, he would be the world champion at delivering mistruths. Both sides of the argument have flaws and details which don't quite connect and make sense. But regardless of whether you believe or don't believe his story, the truth is that this man is solely responsible for the reason you know the name Area 51. So that's it. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Unfortunately, there was so much information that I wanted to put in here that I had to cut out just to keep it to half hour. So there will be a part 2 and a part 3 to this. If you're on Facebook, please join us on the Average Joe Conspiracy Show Facebook page, where you'll be able to vote for the different topics that we discuss moving forward. Starting from January, I will be on Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, and I'll also be opening up a Twitter account, so keep an eye out for that. If you've liked this content, please like, share and subscribe. It really does help me out. And thank you so much for watching. Oh, and Merry Christmas.